Hello, Ali. Hello, A Giggles and Kelly and Billy. I think I saw your name. Welcome all. I'm Gildart, and this is Fireside Reading, where every day at 5 I sit in front of the fire and read a little bit of a book to anyone who wants to join us. It's a lovely little community that has grown. I have gotten a lot of very sweet thank yous from everyone about the wine glasses that we sent out, so that you can have a little tipple when you're listening, if that's your thing. I'm very, very glad that we are a little group that gets together every day and enjoys these lovely old books. And currently, we are in the middle of The Woman in White, and tragically, yesterday, Laura Fairley, our heroine, as I thought she was our heroine, died. Well, I was very surprised when I read that, I have to tell you. And judging from a few of the comments that I read right at the end when I turned everything off, so were you. So, sadly, we now have to find out what goes on. What goes on with poor Walter? Well, we're not going to have to wait a long time to find out. Welcome to a fireside reading of The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Reading 50. Two. The narrative of the doctor.
To the registrar of the sub-district. To the registrar of the sub-district in which the undermentioned death took place, I hereby certify that I attended Lady Glyde, aged 21, last birthday, that I last saw her on Thursday, the 25th of July, 1850, that she died on the same day at number 5 Forest Road, St. John's Wood, and that the cause of her death was aneurysm, duration of disease not known. Signed, Alfred Goodrick. Professional title, MRCS England LSA, address 12 Croydon Gardens, St. John's Wood.
3. The narrative of Jane Gould. I was the person sent in by Mr. Goodrick to do what was right and needful by the remains of a lady who died at the house named in the certificate which precedes this. I found the body in charge of the servant, Hester Pinhorn. I remained with it and prepared it at the proper time for the grave. It was laid in the coffin in my presence, and I afterwards saw the coffin screwed down previous to its removal. When that had been done, and not before, I received what was due to me and left the house. I refer persons who may wish to investigate my character to Mr. Goodrick. He will bear witness that I can be trusted to tell the truth. Signed, Jane Gould. 4. The narrative of the tombstone. Sacred to the memory of Laura, Lady Glyde, wife of Sir Percival Glyde, Bart, of Blackwater Park, Hampshire, and daughter of the late Philip Fairley, Esquire, of Limmeridge House, in this parish. Born March the 27th, 1829. Married December the 22nd, 1849. Died July the 25th, 1850. 5. The narrative of Walter Hartwright. Early in the summer of 1850, I and my surviving companions left the wilds and forests of Central America for home. Arrived at the coast, we took ship there for England. The vessel was wrecked in the Gulf of Mexico. I was among the few saved from the sea. It was my third escape from peril of death. Death by disease, death by the Indians, death by drowning, All three had approached me. All three had passed me by. The survivors of the wreck were rescued by an American vessel bound for Liverpool. The ship reached her port on the 13th day of October 1850. We landed late in the afternoon, and I arrived in London the same night. These pages are not the record of my wanderings and my dangers away from home. The motives which led me from my country and my friends to a new world of adventure and peril are known. From that self-imposed exile, I came back as I had hoped, prayed, believed I should come back, a changed man. In the waters of a new life, I had tempered my nature afresh. In the stern school of extremity and danger, my will had learnt to be strong, my heart to be resolute, my mind to rely on itself. I had gone out to fly from my own future. I came back to face it, as a man should. To face it with that inevitable suppression of myself, which I knew it would demand from me. I had parted with the worst bitterness of the past, but not with my heart's remembrance of the sorrow and the tenderness of that memorable time. I had not ceased to feel the one irreparable disappointment of my life. I had only learnt to bear it. Laura Fairley was in all my thoughts when the ship bore me away, and I looked my last upon England. Laura Fairley was in all my thoughts when the ship brought me back, and the morning light showed the friendly shore in view. My pen traces the old letters as my heart goes back to the old love. I write of her as Laura Fairley still. It is hard to think of her. It is hard to speak of her by her husband's name. There are no more words of explanation to add on my appearance for the second time in these pages. This narrative, if I have the strength and courage to write it, may now go on. My first anxieties and first hopes, when the morning came, centred in my mother and my sister. I felt the necessity of preparing them for the joy and surprise of my return, after an absence during which it had been impossible for them to receive any tidings of me for months past. Early in the morning I sent a letter to the Hampstead cottage and followed it myself in an hour's time. When the first meeting was over, when our quiet and composure of other days began gradually to return to us, I saw something in my mother's face which told me that a secret oppression lay heavy on her heart. There was more than love. There was sorrow in the anxious eyes that looked on me so tenderly. There was pity in the kind hand that slowly and fondly strengthened its hold on mine. We had no concealments from each other. She knew how the hope of my life had been wrecked. She knew why I had left. It was on my lips to ask as composedly as I could if any letter had come for me from Miss Holcombe, if there was any news of her sister that I might hear. But when I looked in my mother's face, I lost courage to put the question, even in that guarded form. I could only say doubtingly and restrainedly, "You have something to tell me?" My sister, who had been sitting opposite to us, rose suddenly without a word of explanation, rose and left the room. My mother moved closer to me on the sofa and put her arms around my neck. Those fond arms trembled. The tears flowed fast over the faithful, loving face Walter, she whispered, my own darling, my heart is heavy for you. Oh, my son, my son. Try to remember that I am still left. My head sank on her bosom. She had said all in saying those words. It was the morning of the third day since my return, the morning of the 16th of October. I had remained with them at the cottage. I had tried hard not to embitter the happiness of my return to them as it was embittered to me. I had done all man could to rise after the shock and accept my life resignedly, to let my great sorrow come in tenderness to my heart and not in despair. It was useless and hopeless. No tears soothed my aching eyes. No relief came to me from my sister's sympathy or my mother's love. On that third morning, I opened my heart to them. At last the words passed my lips which I had longed to speak on the day when my mother told me of her death. "Let me go away alone for a little while," I said. "I shall bear it better when I have looked once more at the place where I first saw her, when I have knelt and prayed by the grave where they have laid her to rest." I departed on my journey to the grave of Laura Fairley. It was a quiet autumn afternoon when I stopped at the solitary station and set forth alone on foot by the well-remembered road. The waning sun was shining faintly through thin white clouds. The air was warm and still. The peacefulness of the lonely country was overshadowed and saddened by the influence of the falling year. I reached the moor. I stood again on the brow of the hill. I looked on along the path, and there were the familiar garden trees in the distance, the clear sweeping semicircle of the drive, the high white walls of Limmeridge House. The chances and changes, the wanderings and dangers of months and months past, all shrank and shriveled to nothing in my mind. It was like yesterday since my feet had last trodden the fragrant, healthy ground. I thought I could see her coming to meet me, with her little straw hat shading her face, her simple dress fluttering in the air, and her well-filled sketchbook ready in her hand. O death, thou hast thy sting. O grave, thou hast thy victory. I turned aside, and there below me in the glen was the lonesome grey church. The porch where I had waited for the coming of the woman in white, the hills encircling the quiet burial ground, the brook bubbling cold over its stony bed. There was the marble cross, fair and white, at the head of the tomb that now rose over mother and daughter alike. I approached the grave. I crossed once more the low stone stile and bared my head as I touched the sacred ground, sacred to gentleness and goodness, sacred to reverence and grief. I stopped before the pedestal from which the cross rose. On one side of it, on the side nearest to me, the newly cut inscription met my eyes, the hard, clear, cruel black letters which told the story of her life and death. I tried to read them. I did read as far as the name, sacred to the memory of Laura. The kind blue eyes, dim with tears, the fair head drooping wearily, the innocent, parting words which implored me to leave her. Oh, for a happier last memory of her than this. The memory I took away with me, the memory I bring back with me to her grave. The second time I tried to read the inscription, I saw at the end the date of her death, and above it there were lines on the marble. There was a name among them which disturbed my thoughts of her. I went round to the other side of the grave, where there was nothing to read, nothing of earthly vileness to force its way between her spirit and mine. I knelt down by the tomb. I laid my head on the broad white stone, and closed my weary eyes on the earth around, on the light above. I let her come back to me. Oh, my love, my heart may speak to you now. It is yesterday again since we parted, yesterday since your dear hand lay in mine, yesterday since my eyes looked their last on you, my love, my love. Time had flown on, and silence had fallen like thick night over its course. The first sound that came after the heavenly peace rustled faintly like a passing breath of air over the grass of the burial ground. I heard it nearing me slowly, until it came changed to my ear, came like footsteps moving onward, then stopped. I looked up. The sunset was near at hand. The clouds had parted. The slanting light fell mellow over the hills. The last of the day was cold and clear and still in the quiet valley of the dead. Beyond me, in the burial ground, standing together in the cold clearness of the lower light, I saw two women. They were looking towards the tomb, looking towards me. Two. They came a little on and stopped again. Their veils were down and hid their faces from me. When they stopped, one of them raised her veil. In the still evening light, I saw the face of Marian Holcomb. Changed, as if years had passed over it. The eyes large and wild and looking at me with a strange terror in them. The face worn and wasted piteously. Pain and fear and grief written on her as with a brand. I took one step towards her from the grave. She never moved. She never spoke. The veiled woman, with her, cried out faintly. I stopped. The springs of my life fell low, and the shuddering of an unutterable dread crept over me from head to foot. The woman with the veiled face moved away from her companion and came towards me slowly. Left by herself, standing by herself, Marian Holcomb spoke. It was the voice that I remembered, the voice not changed, like the frightened eyes and the wasted face. My dream! I heard her say those words softly in the awful silence. She sank on her knees and raised her clasped hands to heaven. Father, strengthen him! Father, help him in his hour of need! The woman came on. slowly and silently came on. I looked at her and at none other from that moment. The voice that was praying for me faltered and sank low, then rose on a sudden and called affrightedly, called despairingly to me to come away. But the veiled woman had possession of me, body and soul. She stopped on one side of the grave. We stood face to face, with the tombstone between us. She was close to the inscription on the side of the pedestal. Her gown touched the black letters. The voice came nearer and rose more passionately still. "Hide your face! Don't look at her! Oh, for God's sake, spare him!" The woman lifted her veil, sacred to the memory of Laura Lady Glyde. Laura Lady Glyde was standing by the inscription and was looking at me over the grave. The second epoch of the story closes here. What a good book it is. Well, I'm not sure, but I think we have our wish. We're going to find out how, and I do have a slight idea as to how, but I think we're going to find out how that really is Laura. I very much hope that it is. More tomorrow. I will be reading tomorrow, but I won't be reading on Friday, and I might not be reading on Saturday. I'm going to let you know tomorrow. So I'll definitely see you tomorrow at 5 Pacific. And until then, everyone stay very well and very happy that Laura isn't gone. I'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, good night.